Hello, everyone. Welcome to Psychedelic Insights. Adam and I have the pleasure of having on Anthony Tennyson, CEO of Awaken Life Science. Awaken Life Sciences? How are you doing today, Anthony?
Hey Jake, I'm good. I'm good. And good speaking with you also, Adam, as well.
Think we're happy to have you.
Pleasure to be on here.
So yeah, we had a couple of our viewers asked to bring you on, and I'm excited to learn more about the work you're doing, especially with ketamine assisted therapy for alcohol use disorder. As someone like myself who actually wants to do substance use counseling eventually, very curious to talk more about how this therapy compares to the standard of care that's being used now in the field of addiction. And with that being said, let's get started with the first question. So to start, could you please give our audience a high-level overview of Awaken as a company? There have been a lot of recent developments, from divesting your clinic operations to planning the launch of a phase 3 trial using ketamine-assisted therapy to treat severe alcohol use disorder. It would be great if you could get us all up to speed on where Awaken is today.
Sure, Jake, happy to. So Awaken is a clinical stage biotechnology company developing therapeutics to treat addiction with a near-term focus on alcohol use disorder, which unfortunately is a condition that affects 285 million people globally, but really importantly, it affects 40 million people in the US and the big 5 European economies. Our therapeutics consist of drug and psychosocial support together to treat addiction. The drug element, Jake, of what we do we adopt a polypharmacology approach where we're using the drug to target the brain circuits that house the behaviors that drive the addiction. And we're looking to disrupt those brain circuits with the drugs that we use in our therapeutics package. And then the psychosocial support element of what we do aims to instill lasting relapse prevention behaviors. And this approach has really been proven to work through a successful phase 2 trial that we completed. Our approach to our R&D is focused on repurposing approved drugs and developing soon to be approved drugs to specifically target addiction. And that approach, Jake, ensures that we reduce risk, reduce time, reduce cost, and we have efficacy proven. And as you mentioned, though, we did previously have some healthcare assets in the business in addition to our R&D assets. So we've exited the healthcare business. And the reason we set the company up with that dual focus of R&D and healthcare services was that when you look at addiction, particularly in the US market, it's different from other chronic diseases. In the US, on average, about 75% of the cost to the system comes from healthcare services, and 25% direct costs come from drug or medicine. For addiction, it's 96% of costs to the US system come from healthcare services, and only 4% come from medication and drug. So we want to provide hope for families, communities, and individuals whose lives have been disrupted and continue to be disrupted by addiction. And in order to provide that hope, by developing effective therapeutics to treat addiction, we needed and wanted to understand how the healthcare business works. And so that's why we set the business up with the dual focus, so that what we do on the R&D side would be informed by what we've learned and learn in the healthcare services side. We've learned what we need to learn from healthcare. We've exited the healthcare services business, and we are now focused 100% on developing therapeutics to treat addiction, being very much informed by what we've learned from how psychedelic assisted therapies can be efficiently and effectively delivered in healthcare services. So within the business now, we've got 3 R&D programs that we're executing at low cost, low risk, and low time to market, or reduced time to market. Program 1 is our lead program, repurposing racemic ketamine to treat severe alcohol use disorder, targeting the UK market. And we've been lucky enough to have support from the UK state, and the UK state are picking up. We're moving from phase 2 into phase 3, groundbreaking results, which we'll get into, but groundbreaking results in the phase 2. and now groundbreaking reduced cost and risk for the phase 3. Total price for the phase 3, 2.25 million sterling, and our contribution is capped at 800,000 sterling or $1 million US, which is unheard of. Our secondary program, which we're going to bring into the US market, is focused on repurposing S-ketamine into an oral thin film for efficient sublingual delivery, targeting alcohol use disorders in the US market. And our third program is again being informed by what we learned in the clinics about everything needing to be done efficiently. We're looking to address the known pharmacokinetic challenges with MDMA by partnering with Catalent, one of the world's leading drug development and distribution companies, to repurpose MDMA, I should say, into an oral sublingual delivery. And we believe we can address the known pharmacokinetic challenges that exist with MDMA. So that's us in a nutshell. We're a clinical stage biotech developing therapeutics to treat addiction with a near-term focus on alcohol use disorder. Everything we do is focused on being efficient with time, reducing risk, and being efficient with capital. And we've got 3 programs, one at late clinical stage and others at earlier clinical stage, but all of which are being focused or purposed at treating addiction at low cost and low risk to the balance sheet.
That was a great overview. Thank you so much, Anthony. That was great. I'm going to move on to the next question here. What type of clinical setting does this therapy require for ketamine? Is there an existing clinical infrastructure in place, or does it still need to be built out more? Further, do you expect rehab clinics to adopt this therapy once approved?
Okay, so there's a couple of sort of strands or levels to answer that question. First of all, we've run ketamine clinics, and we're also partnering with ketamine clinics still, where we're licensing out what we developed in our clinics to other clinics. So we know a bit about the clinics business. Ketamine is really efficient for use in the healthcare setting. And the reason for that is there's 90 minutes in the experience, 90 minutes to relax before someone can be released to leave the clinic environment. It's also, people tend to be non-responsive in the experience. So with an eye mask on and headphones on. So it's relatively efficient on use of time, real estate square footage, and human resources. And that's really what sets ketamine apart from the other psychedelics that are also in late clinical stage. Yeah. Psilocybin and MDMA require about 8 hours in the experience, with about 8 hours to recover before being released. Because people need to use the toilet, that means you need 2 therapists in the room to provide coverage for toilet breaks in the therapist set. It also requires specialist infrastructure to be built, because you need an ensuite toilet, because you can't bring someone during the experience through reception and into the toilet. So there's challenges that will exist to the successful deployment at scale of the traditional long-acting psychedelics that does not exist for ketamine-assisted therapy. So that's why we like it. It's effective, but very importantly, it's efficient. Now, from the addiction industry, we are particularly encouraged by the potential success that psychedelics will have for deployment within the addiction treatment industry. And the reason for that is in the US alone, there are 16,000 clinics treating substance use disorders. There are 14,000 treating alcohol use disorder. Of those, 80% are currently set up and approved for delivering medicated assisted therapy.
Yes, okay.
So the infrastructure exists for the deployment of medication-assisted therapy for the treatment of alcohol use disorder at scale in the US, in the way that it doesn't exist, in my opinion, for the treatment of PTSD or treatment-resistant depression, which are currently treated based upon a 15 or 30-minute visit with a psychiatrist or an hour visit with a talk-based therapist. You look at the other through the lens for substance use disorders and alcohol use disorders. 14,000 clinics set up in the US for treating AUD, 80% currently already delivering medication-assisted therapy, and many of those are currently also delivering CBT. So they're set up, the infrastructure is there to more readily adopt psychedelics for the treatment of addiction compared to other indications.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Anthony. Just thinking here, how often so for the protocol that you guys are using, how often would someone be undergoing a ketamine treatment session? Is it similar to how esketamine for treatment-resistant depression is, where it's like, I believe it's 2 times a week the first month, and then it goes to once every week, I think, for the next couple of months? Is it a similar dosing regimen?
It's not. It's not the same dosing regimen. It's much more short duration delivering results, and that was proven in the phase 2 trial. So the treatment protocol is an initial medical assessment, detox, and then a therapy session, a ketamine session, an integration session, 3 of those blocks, and a closeout session. You're looking at about 17 hours in clinic in total, and the results were pretty groundbreaking in the phase 2 trial. People coming onto that trial, Jake, they were abstinent, so sober, 2% of the time. That's abstinent 7 days a year. The people that went through the active arm for AWKN-P001, we achieved an abstinence rate of 86% on average in the 6 months post-treatment. That is a material improvement pre-trial, but very importantly, it's 3.5 times better than the current standard of care, which is about 25% abstinence in the 6 to 12 months post-treatment. So this approach, this AWKN-P001, represents a potential significant improvement against current standard of care for the treatment of alcohol use disorder. And very interestingly for us, when we look at the FDA accepted endpoint for alcohol use disorder, which is reduction in heavy days drinking, we achieved a 50% reduction in heavy days drinking versus placebo in that phase 2 trial. Really interestingly, we also achieved a 50% reduction in heavy days drinking versus the market leading drug in the US, which is Vivitrol, in our phase 2 versus their phase 3.
Wow. So Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong here. So the results you saw from phase 2B, that was just from one dosing session with the preparation and integration?
Right, there were 3. So
Three. Okay.
initial medical assessment, prep, ketamine, and there's 3 of those blocks. So nine meetings, 3 ketamine sessions in total, and then a closeout session.
And you followed them up, what, 6 months later, correct?
Correct.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's incredible. I actually had thought it was more dosing sessions for some reason. So that makes it even more
very efficient. And the psychosocial support in our lead program, it's manualized CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's a 150-page therapy manual, and that really makes it very efficient for training. Because it's manualized, we can take therapists with relatively lower experience, so an advanced degree and 1 year's experience in CBT, and we can train them in a couple of days. So this is really, everything we're doing here is designed to be adopted at scale within the existing addiction treatment industry.
Awesome. Now, question for you on the therapy. Is it, I guess, like, what type of expectations are set, I guess, maybe by the therapist? Like, now in, I guess, the way addiction's treated now, it's like abstinence only. Like, if you mess up, if you like relapse, it's like a really bad thing. But I mean, obviously unfortunately it's expected that people are going to not be 100% abstinent. But at the same time, sorry, where I'm going with this is, like, the expectations that are set by therapists, do they put it in the people's head, in the client's head, that like you should remain completely abstinent, or is there room for error? If
Well, that's entirely down to the relationship between the individual and the therapist. During the trial, it's different, right?
Okay.
Well, sorry, in the trial there is a desired outcome, but in the real world, so in our clinics,
Yes.
it's down to the relationship between the therapist and the client as to what outcome the individual wants. Now, I think, when you look at the AA is pretty rigid on it being total abstinence.
Yes.
Whereas I think the real world is a bit more nuanced. We achieved very, very good results in the phase 2 trial. We have had successes in the real world, but the actual interaction between on outcomes is specific to the interaction between the therapist and the client as they go through their treatment in the real world.
Okay, great. And my last question before I hand it off to Adam here is, can you talk a little bit? We actually had Nushama Wellness come on the channel. I very much enjoyed talking to the founders, and they are very passionate about what they do. Can you talk about your relationship with Nushama?
Sure, happy to. So we've got a business service line within the business called licensing partnerships. And on our licensing partnerships, it's about empowering clinics to treat people with alcohol use disorder as soon as possible in a more effective manner than is currently available. So we do two things in our licensing partnerships business. One, we're licensing the therapeutic approach developed in our phase 2 trial. So the therapy side of our lead program, we're licensing that to them, and we're training them. And essentially, on a small scale, we're establishing the ecosystem and the infrastructure for when we get our therapeutics on label. The second thing we're doing is we're actually packaging up all the IP we developed in our clinics business before we sold the clinics business, but we maintained and retained all the IP, and we're now licensing that out almost like a franchise to third-party clinics. So there's a clinic in Portugal where we've licensed our brand, our therapies for addiction, anxiety, depression, PTSD, eating disorders. We're training their team, and we're providing them access to Professor Celia Nutt and Professor David Nutt to help them grow their business. And it ranges, in our licensing partnerships business, it ranges from purely just licensing our therapeutic approach for the treatment of alcohol use disorder, all the way to essentially licensing everything that we developed in Awaken clinics prior to us selling those clinics on to other people. And with Nushama, we have licensed them, provided them access to our therapeutic for treating alcohol use disorder under license. They're a really, really good team. We've given them an exclusive license for New York, and we're really, really very pleased with the relationship. And we're really pleased that they are getting to provide alternative, effective treatments to individuals and families in New York for whom the current treatments aren't effective.
That's great. Thank you so much for these fantastic answers. I feel like I'm actually learning a lot more about Awaken from this, and I think our viewers are going to also learn a lot more. Thank you so much. Adam, I'm going to pass it to you here.
All right. To get things started here. So common questions we see about Awaken amongst the online investment community revolve around the strength of IP, especially since ketamine is a generic drug and can't be patented itself. Can you please walk us through Awaken's IP protection, specifically as it relates to AWKN-P001?
Sure, happy to. So there's a couple of ways to commercialize things in the pharmaceutical industry. And one is through NCEs, but the other is through repurposing generic and previously approved drugs. And that's the route that we've taken. We're focusing on repurposing approved drugs, so racemic ketamine and S-ketamine, and soon to be approved drugs, MDMA. Worth noting, we do have an NCE program that we paused where we developed several series of completely novel entactogens that interact with all the known receptor sites for MDMA, but on completely novel scaffolds, and will be considered completely new compounds. So we've got a sort of a multi-layered approach to our IP protection. Okay. With our lead program, we're taking a fastest route to market approach in the UK with racemic ketamine. We partnered with the Department of Health to progress from phase 2 into phase 3. I think what's really important for your viewers to contemplate is the UK is a distinct region from the US. In the UK, there's one buyer. That's the NHS. They control 90% of the marketplace.
I see.
To access the NHS, you need NICE approval. NICE approval is essentially the UK version of a CPT1 code. And that gives the NHS the ability to purchase your service. The NHS has the second largest healthcare budget on the planet at $280 billion a year. The NHS will not deviate from a label. So our intention is to complete the phase 3 trial, which we're executing at extremely low cost and extremely low risk, apply for marketing authorization for our own brand of ketamine, and combining that with the label and the RMP, so that's the UK version of REMS, to tie together our patented or our copywritten therapy. And we will be the only brand of ketamine that the NHS can use to treat severe alcohol use disorder. And the NHS does not deviate from labels once NICE approves it. There are 675,000 people suffering with alcohol use disorder, severe alcohol use disorder in the UK. There's 100,000 in treatment at any one time through the NHS. So it isn't the deepest IP moat. It's purely a commercial and regulatory strategy that we are taking advantage of a very low cost, low risk opportunity for the UK. We need a different approach for the US.
Okay.
And we need an approach with a deeper IP moat for the US. And so we have partnered with a European pharmaceutical company who have repurposed S-ketamine into an oral thin film for sublingual delivery. And we are going to target all alcohol use disorders in the US with that drug product. They have filed patents in the US, Europe, China, and Japan, and they have completed phase 1.
Okay.
We are in the final stages of testing that drug product, and subject to the results of those tests, we'll complete a global exclusive in-licensing agreement with them. It is a very similar approach that a larger psychedelics company has taken, Compass. They have no IP around the molecule, but they have the IP around the delivery mechanism of the molecule. It's the same approach that we're taking with S-ketamine. And if we are successful in completing the in-licensing agreement, because they have phase 1 completed, that will enable us to go straight into late clinical stage for S-ketamine with patents filed internationally for the treatment of alcohol use disorders in the US. We would intend to go for a pre-IND meeting with the FDA, and ideally request to only have to do one pivotal trial, because S-ketamine is already on label for intranasal delivery for treatment-resistant depression. And so that is a much more traditional repurposing approach with appropriate IP protections in place that we will have progress updates on over the next couple of months. And then when we look at our third program, which is to develop MDMA into an oral disintegrating tablet for sublingual delivery. Again, we like MDMA. We know trauma is a causal factor for many mental health conditions and for most substance use disorders. We think there's challenges around the way that MDMA can really be commercialized at scale with its current format and route of administration. So that's why we're partnering with Catalent. We're in the final stages of a feasibility study with them. We're very pleased with the progress that we're making. Catalent have an impenetrable IP moat around their Zydus formulation. And we think that's a pretty exciting and interesting pathway forward for us. And the next stages for us are to complete the feasibility study with them, and to complete a global exclusive license agreement with Catalent. So our IP moat around our lead program is the skinniest, but we're taking a very commercial, rapid approach into a walled garden in the UK, and intentionally doing so. For our secondary program, S-ketamine, there are patents and IP protections in place that are traditional and follow the same route for repurposing. And for our program with MGMA, there is a very deep IP moat in place by Catalent around their Zydus platform. And we also have an NCE program with novel series on completely novel scaffolds developed with patents filed. And if anyone wants to go, the patents roll up on PatentScope as well. I would also add, we have filed patents around the use of MDMA to treat alcohol use disorder. We have filed patents on the use of ketamine to treat behavioral addictions. So we have got some good IP protection in place for some of the things that we're doing.
Thank you. That was a phenomenal response. To
Yeah.
build on that a little bit further, let's say you get regulatory approval in the UK to treat severe alcohol use disorder with ketamine. What would the process to seek FDA approval? What would be the process to seek FDA approval in the US? Would you have to run brand new clinical trials, or can you leverage the UK approval for some sort of accelerated approval process in the US?
We'll be taking a different approach for the US. We're going to target the UK market with repurposed racemic. IP mode isn't deep enough. The IP protection is suitable for the UK market. It's not deep enough for the US market. So we're partnering with the European pharma company, and we are ideally going to be bringing S-ketamine in an oral thin film for sublingual delivery through into the US market. In such instances, we would be applying to the FDA for a pre-IND meeting. And we will be having a conversation with the FDA as to whether or not we require phase 1 is already completed on that drug product. Would we require phase 2, or could we potentially go straight into a single definitive study given the strong results from phase 2 for racemic ketamine and the S-enantiomer? It's just the S-enantiomer of racemic. We believe it's the more active enantiomer for what we're targeting and what we want to do. We believe, therefore, there is a safety gain and an efficiency gain. And S-ketamine is already on label for an intranasal delivery for treatment-resistant depression. So we'll be having a conversation with the FDA where we'll be leveraging the work that we have completed in the UK with the phase 2, and that we will have active in the UK at that stage, which is the phase 3, and the work that we will be in licensing to be as efficient as we possibly can be with our S-ketamine oral thin film for sublingual delivery for alcohol use disorder, aiming to be as efficient as we possibly can be, again, with time, cost, and with risk.
Got you. And lastly, you have recently raised some capital through private placements. What does Awaken's cash balance look like today, and how much cash runway does Awaken currently have? Also, have you seen an increase in investor interest in the company recently?
So let's take that in reverse order. We're definitely seeing an increase in investor interest in the company. I think the capital markets are thawing out a little bit for biotech. Certainly, the private market for biotech is being corrected and is beginning to be righted. And it is only going to hopefully be a matter of time before the capital markets come right. With Fed's announcements around pausing further interest rate increases, hopefully we'll start to see capital being deployed into the higher risk parts of the capital markets, such as biotech. But certainly we're having more inbound inquiries and conversations now than we've had at any reading stage over the last 12 months. We have, through getting rid of or exiting the clinics business, we have significantly reduced our burn. We've taken about 60 to 70% of the burn out of the company. Our burn is in the region of 300,000 Canadian a month. We've got more work to do to raise more money to give us an extended runway. But, you know, we're in the middle of a financing. We've closed 2.75 Canadian of a targeted 4 million Canadian private placement. Very importantly, that is being priced at 100% above market, which is unheard of when the markets are performing. And it is never heard of in a current market conditions like this. But we're very lucky. It's been cornerstoned by an existing investor. With the cash that we have on hand, and when we close out that round for the targeted amount, that will give us runway out through to mid Q2 next year. And we can achieve some significant milestones in that time. So out to the end of Q2 next year for our lead program, regulatory and ethical approval, which we're targeting this year, first participant, which we're targeting Q1 next year. For our secondary program, completing the testing of the drug product, signing the global licensing agreement with the European Pharma Company, and announcing the results of that test of the drug product in harmful drinkers. And for our third program, completing the feasibility study with Catalent, completing a PK study in animal, and signing a global exclusive license agreement with Catalent. All of those things we can achieve between now and mid Q2 next year, and all of that can be achieved with the money that we'll have on the balance sheet when we close the round that is currently open, and the money that we have on the balance sheet through cash on hand and the financing that we've just closed.
Got you. Thank you so much for the well thought out responses. I'm okay with my questions. Jake, if you want to add anything before you go.
No, I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation today. I learned a lot more about Awaken, and no, this is really exciting stuff. And I would just like to thank you for taking the time to come on the channel, and I think our viewers are going to really enjoy this one. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you so much, Anthony. Have a great weekend. And thank you to our viewers for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and have a wonderful weekend, guys.